Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's data analyst project, we're going to be building the crosstab behind me. What this is used for is to identify whether or not the business or product you're assigned to is whale driven. Is 80% of the revenue on your product driven by 20% of your customers? This is an example of a whale driven product. Or conversely, is your product or business non-whale driven? Meaning the majority of customers spend roughly the same amount of revenue. In the crosstab behind me, you can see that this is a business where 20% of the revenue is driven by less than 5% of the spending customers. This is a whale-driven product. And again, I'm going to show you how to get this data in SQL Server now. Okay, so here's our basic revenue table. What we want to do is just aggregate revenue by customer. And we can add a coalesce here to make sure that if there are any nulls in this column, they get converted to zeros before our aggregation. Okay, there we go. Now let's turn this into a subselect and call this A. And we're going to select the same columns. Now we're going to write a window function to basically order our customers by revenue descending, where the highest paying customer will be in the first record and the lowest paying customer will be in the very last record. Okay, there you go. Our revenue rank column is in the third column now. So we're going to turn all of this into another subselect. And we're going to add two more columns. Let's change our table aliases. Okay, so these two new columns are window functions, and what they do is they return the total spenders and total revenue per record in our data set, which is really important. This is what window functions do versus aggregations, because aggregations involve group bys, which collapse records. So we need this because we need to do divisional math, right? And say this percentage of customers contributed X percentage of revenue. So this is why we need to do this. There's one special thing about this, which is a partition by 1, What that's basically saying is take the max of this column or take the sum of this column, and you don't need to dimensionalize it or kind of group it by anything. Just take the straight max and straight sum, and whatever the value is, scribe it onto every record in this table. Okay, great. So those two new columns have been added. Now, what I would recommend before things get too crazy is rather than writing another subselect, let's just put this into a temporary table. Okay, so this is pretty good. Okay, so there's our temporary table. Now what we need to do is we need to take this table and we need to join it back to itself so that we can get cumulative revenue, which changes per record in this table, and we're going to do it based on this revenue rank value. Okay, so before we do this join, I'm going to explain exactly what's going to happen here. So if you look at the revenue rank column, here's a value of 3. What we need to do is go back to the same table and return all records that are less than or equal to 3. So 3, 2, 1, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to bring back these 3 revenue records for this one record. And we're going to sum it and put it in a new column called cumulative revenue. And this is going to happen systematically for every record in this table, okay? So b.revenue rank has to be less than or equal to a.revenue rank. b.revenue. Again, for safety, just put a coalesce in there. Okay, so because, going back to this example, in revenue rank we have value 3. After this join, it's going to bring back all records that are less than or equal to 3, which will be 3 records, and these 3 records will be summed, their values will be summed, and that'll get put into the cumulative revenue column that we just added. And again, because we're summing those 3 records per this one record here, you need to put these columns in the group I. Okay, great. Now we have cumulative revenue. So we're almost at the finish line. Let's just do one more subselect. Call this table A is fine. We want a revenue rank. And then we want to know the percentage of spenders and the percentage of total revenue, right? So this is how we're going to do that. Now we're going to multiply this by 1.0. It's a little trick to turn this data type into a float so that we can return a percentage. Do cumulative revenue divided by total revenue. .0. Okay, so let's check our work here. Okay. And now let's name these fields. Let's add a semicolon. And here are the results. Pretty cool, right? So let's wait a couple seconds for this to run. There we go. Now let's move this over to Excel so we can inspect our data a little more. Let's turn these into percentages. And here we go, here's our data. So as an example, you can see if we look at row 143, we see 10%, a whopping 10% of revenue driven by less than 2% of total spenders. So again, this is an example walkthrough on how to use a query to identify whether or not a business is whale driven. Thank you so much for joining. Continue to like and subscribe.